Hi, welcome to Building Renaissance Leaders. This is my YouTube channel where I focus on leadership concepts. Today, I am going to talk about the United States government. Now, as a consultant for 45 years, either internally, where I was asked to intervene and help solve a problem.
Did that go the way you thought it was going to go? Nope.
Now, I normally am not brought in unless there's a problem. And a lot of times, the people who were having the problem didn't recognize they were having the problem. So it was normally somebody external to them who decided, hey, look, I think we ought to bring Vic in here. Maybe he can help us solve some of this issues. So I want to talk to you in that vein as a consultant. And I want you to, I want to present what I'm about to tell you in a micro level, the way I would handle it if I were, say, brought into an organization that was having a particular problem with a particular department in the organization, let's say. And I then want to widen that out to a more macro level and sort of associate what's happening in our government right now with the same thing that happens inside organizations, companies, if you will, that I come in and help correct problems relative to their ability to have the right culture, the right interaction between the people in that department. So I can tell you a story where at one point in time, I was contracted with, or I was asked to come in and take a look at a particular department in the organization. And the frustration that the chief executive officer and the board was having with this department is that the employees were frustrated with their leader. But more importantly, that was impacting the overall performance of that department. And they couldn't quite get their arms around it. So, and I understand that because they're pretty close to it. You know, they hired the people into the department and all the things that are associated. Sometimes it's good to get it an arm's length away from that and allow a third party to come in there and kind of at least paint the picture of what some of the issues might be. So that's when people call me, I come in. The first thing I do is sit down with that leadership and I say, I want you to realize that I need some information, some data. I don't do anything that isn't at least premised on evidence-based data that I can look at and say, yeah, I can validate this information is happening. So I normally propose the first thing we do is to conduct an assessment. Sometimes I'll broaden that out to the whole organization so that one department isn't really feel isolated and all of a sudden get scared and the kind of information you're going to get is a little more restricted, a little more guarded, if you will. So sometimes I come in and we do a whole organizational assessment. And we might find that most of the departments are doing just fine when you look at the data. Now, those assessments I do are focused on leadership, they're focused on communication, and generally the culture. Those three areas are the primary areas I look at. And one of the assessments covers two of those areas I tend to use on a frequent basis. Covers both of those areas extremely well. They cover the culture, they cover the leadership dynamic in relation to the culture, and also the team interaction on that. So that's one of them. The communication uh, assessment I use is one that I designed because that is my specialty in my area. I've been operating in for almost 45 years as a specialist in that area. I designed one that because I couldn't find a communication assessment that kind of covered what we needed to do that interacted well with those leadership, team, and culture databases that were measuring those areas. Primarily because most communications assessments are designed by professors and not people who are actually on the ground in a company and dealing with those communication aspects that are associated with the behavior of the department. So anyway, those are the assessments I would run. I would come in, I run a full-blown assessment. Most of them are done on computers, so and they're done by me, and the data isn't in any way controlled by the corporation. In many cases, I have a third party or maybe a fourth party. I would bring in someone to do that cultural and leadership and team assessment, and then I would handle the communication assessment, and then those consultants would work with me on the analysis of all of the other stuff. And being a leader for so many years and an expert in leadership, it was easy for me to coordinate with them. But what really worked well for them is having that other eyeball on it, in addition to myself, to get a more accurate read on the data. So once all that data is collected, I had always created a system I call the organizational effectiveness. Now that's not a term I created, but that I call it the organizational effectiveness assessment. And it's a process whereby I do the instruments assessments first, the criteria that we tend to look at when we say leadership and communication and things like that. Once those are uh, administered, the data has been collected, the analytics have been done on that data. We bring that back in and we take a look at what the summations of that data says from the evidence that we looked at. And in there is that department that we're looking at. And usually, if the organization's humming fairly well, you that department's going to stand out. Uh, Now, we haven't shared this with the whole organization yet, obviously. Uh, and this is just with the senior management. In some cases, the senior management gets a surprise and they say, oh my God, there's another area over here we need to look at too. Maybe not as bad as the one that they've isolated, but sometimes those assessments prove more useful than just the single department. But normally that department will stand out, and so they will feel comfortable and can feel validated that what they were thinking was correct and that there needs to be some work done in that area. But with this data now, we have the ability to isolate the kinds of things and even prioritize the kinds of things that we need to deal with. Leadership, the how as a team, how are they doing? How is the leadership perceived from a 360-degree angle? This data is collected on a 360 degree. So if we were looking at the head of that department, we'd be looking at what their employees say about the head of that department, what the peers that operate with them say about that department head, and what the bosses think about that department head. They would all be consolidated, and they wouldn't be isolated out into those categories. It'd be aggregated into one database showing significant data. If there's a lot of concurrence between the employees, the peers, and the leaders about a particular problem area, that's pretty good indication that if we focus on that problem area, we might be able to help that leader improve. The other thing that is important about taking this approach is making sure that we don't do any disciplinary or firing or any hiring kinds of decisions on this kind of data. This is not what you want to do with this kind of data. It is primarily designed to help that person if they can make the transition back into normalcy, to try to help them to get there, to correct any issues they have and get back into the normal flow of things. So it's very much a help oriented, employee centered approach to consulting and solving problems within an organization. Uh, but it will isolate. So that particular style of assessment plus, uh, and once we get the data and it's summarized before we present it to the executives, I go in and maybe I'll have a couple of other people work with me, and we do some interviews with employees. And what we're doing in those interviews is asking the employees similar kinds of questions, but on a much smaller scale, and just sitting there and listening and trying to get their reaction. And this is where communication is a very important role, because you have to truly actively listen. By that I mean you have to make sure you're in the right state of mind when you're conducting the interview with the employee and where you're coming from, and so that you get that employee the most comfortable feeling of being able to just sit there and talk about this in a really relaxed way that is not threatening, and they can feel comfortable telling you how they actually feel. You're trying to really get the valid side of the data here. Well, what we're trying to do is validate whether what was put on the instruments pretty much aligns with what we get in these interviews. And I used to ask three questions to kind of get it all started, and from there you can follow up questions. You learn a questioning technique, which is something as leadership you should always learn anyway. But uh, knowing how to ask the questions, knowing how to get that environment set to get the right feedback you're looking for, and encouraging others to be able to provide you that feedback is very, very critical in the questioning process. But it helps validate the databases that we looked at. So if what we're hearing from those employees kind of correlates pretty well with what the data is saying, we got a pretty good validation that that data is something we can actually take and use. And that's important because you don't want any gaps or problems with that evidence-based data that allows somebody to refute the data. Okay, the one thing that makes this a powerful tool to make change is it's awful hard to deny. Once you get in there, you can sit down with the person will, there's a lot of reactions you get in there. Normally, their anger is the first one, and you have to work through that with people. And then the next one is, oh my God, I'm not worth anything. You have to work through that with people. Uh, what this validation of evidence is, this allows the person not to be able to run away from what they are hearing and observing that we're telling them. And that's very important because you're trying to help them, you're not trying to harm them. So by helping them, we can point these things out in a way that is not threatening, that is helpful. It's kind of like, I'm, it's almost like you might not even realize you were doing this kind of thing. So once we had that data validated, we would present the summation. We would give that to the executives, let them look at it for a little while in a written format. Then we come in and counsel with them, help them through the process of assessing that, because some of this may be reflection of them too. So how you present that is very important. And but we're not focusing on them. We're focusing on this department. So what we can do then is say, yeah, the rest of your organization, except for maybe a couple of things over here, this would be your priority department you want to function on. So now, then we can talk about what their role is going to be and going down and working with this department, because we don't want to be seen as a group that's going to come in here and correct those people. We want to be seen as a people who are providing the leaders of those people what they need to do to go down and help work with these people. So we don't allow the CEO or the executive vice president of this department to run away from this and say, okay, we're going to leave you in the hands of the consultants. This is a scenario where this is my methodology, but I basically say, no, no, no. You are the one that's going to go have to make this change. And so we're going to work with you on how you can go down there and help this person. So now that's just a question I would ask about now, just to take a break right here and go back and now take a look at what is happening in our government today. It is actually dysfunctional. And probably if there was somebody above Donald Trump or the president of the United States, someone who oversaw that whole thing, who could say, hey, there's a problem here. We need to bring somebody in and find out what the problem is. Uh, you would probably want to bring someone like myself, or probably a bigger contingent of me, into the United States government to ask some questions. And where it would be nice would be to go in and take a look at assessing that whole organization the same way we would a company if we came in, looking for those areas that we know are hotspots and then being able to see from the evidence-based data those areas that are really, really issues and where we need to prioritize our efforts so that we get the optimal impact on changing that organization to where it needs to be. So let's go back to our department now. Once I had that data there, we would work with the um, executive vice president of that person in charge of that department. And that person would present the data to them. We would coach them before they go in there. We would coach them on how to present that data, the approach they need to take. And in many cases, uh, I spent a lot of time teaching those executives about interpersonal communication because what I've found over my 45 years, the biggest barrier to this kind of process having a significant impact that's positive and actually change behavior was it wasn't the understanding of the technicalities of the particular skill set a leader had to do, like having a difficult conversation with somebody or conducting a team session. They tended to understand the dynamics of that leadership skill. The problem was the communication process they used to deliver that particular skill varies depending on what skill you're applying. And nobody is teaching leaders how to look at what kind of communication skill you want to apply to your leadership skill to optimize that leadership skill's effectiveness. So I spend a lot of time teaching executives and leaders in organization about interpersonal communication and uh, and how to use that to enhance their ability to apply a particular leadership skill. So when they worked with somebody on that particular skill, whether they were having a difficult discussion with them, all of the dynamics of what processes, you don't want to do that through text messages, you don't want to do it through sticky notes. This is a face-to-face conversation now. What are the things that happen when you communicate face-to-face? You have nonverbal communication, you have oral communication, you have tone and inflections. All of those are also nonverbal, but how you deliver it, you need to be kind of aware of your interpersonal state yourself as well as the other person's interpersonal state while you're doing that, so that you can then share and collect the right amount of information in a way where you can help regulate that person to where you want them to be. All that has to happen, but we don't tend to teach that to leaders when we teach communication. We may teach a course on nonverbal and say it's important, or we may teach a course on feedback and it says you're supposed to, recite what they say so you're paying attention and that's important. But there's a lot more to that right there. Just that one thing, so much more than we tend to teach leaders in these courses that people offer out there today. So when I go in, I spend the time to do that with these leaders. So when they go down to meet with their people, they're not just going down how they normally would. They're a little more skilled in being able to sit down with the person and introduce them to the fact that they have a problem. So the idea is to get the employee to discuss where the department is, and through that discussion, recognize, wow, things aren't where they need to be. And we're going, are you happy with that? No, I'm not. And I said, well, okay. So obviously, I probably failed you some extent in that I haven't come down here earlier to talk to you about how I can help you. And see, when you start those kinds of dialogues, all of a sudden, there's a connection. And the connection is taking it off of the individual, putting it on the issue. And if the issue is this person needs to learn something, needs to approach something differently, and learn how to do that also, then we can do that. Now, this is how the executive can introduce me into the department. I'm not introduced as a person who did the assessment, discovered all this stuff, and now I'm the expert and I'm going to show you how to do it. It's I have somebody here who specializes in a lot of these areas. We already know the areas are from the data, so it's not hard to say this guy can help. I think if you're interested, I would be glad to contract with him and have him work with you in your department. Okay, the executive initiates the intervention. The person goes, yeah, gosh, I'd love to have that. And I'm saying, well, God, okay, I'll be glad. I think I have the time. I'll tell you what, why don't you and I sit down and have some coffee and you kind of tell me what's going on, what your pain points are, what I can do to help you. And all of a sudden now that executive has gotten a commitment of that person to do what he thinks that person needs to do to improve, that person's excited about making the transition because it's probably been bothering them. It's not like they're not recognizing this. And all of a sudden, the executive offers a resource, not a control person, not an expert, a resource, which means he's not going to allow that leader of that department to abdicate their responsibility to control, change, and manage this process. But now they have a resource that they can bring in, a tool, if you will, an extra screwdriver, extra wrench, extra specialized wrench that you didn't have before to kind of help you work through things. But you have to guide it, Mr. Department Head. You have to process it. You have to use them. And then it's my responsibility as a consultant to help him make that an easy process to interact with me. One that's not threatening, but is helpful. One where I can be honest and tell him, here are some issues you need to work on yourself. Let's do that. And also how to open this up so his employees understand what's transpiring while this is happening. All of this is part of the intervention process. It begins with the assessment. It's going to end with a reassessment showing the progress. And so that's how that works. And so the department head is now in there, and the employees and the department head are talking about the problem, not the employees, not the department head, the problem they're having. and what skills they need to correct and improve to be able to deal with that problem. Uh, and each of them has their roles and their capabilities. So they get to know each other. They come together better. They're more interpersonally related. And this is where I wrote a book called Navigating Conversations, where uh, emotional intelligence intersects with the mastery of communication. And what I am explaining to people before they start trying to solve these problems is they have to be able to connect. They have to be able to connect because that connection builds trust. And as trust gets built, it opens up transparency. It opens up the freedom to be honest and to address things in the open, if you will. And so I have to kind of educate nearly everybody I deal with in these programs about interpersonal communication. What is that? Interpersonal is the interrelationships. It is the emotional intelligence, the sense of empathy, the sense of compassion, the sense of understanding where somebody is emotionally while you're interacting. Okay, and what kind of environment, emotional environment you want to have between your people when you're interacting with them. What is the most effective one you can have? Uh, and then the other part of interpersonal communication, the communication side of it, is the processes that go on when you communicate one person to the other. And if you keep it just one person to the other, then you're talking about somebody initiates a conversation and they do it by sending a message and they have to think about what that message is they want to send. And there's so much involved around creating a message that you want to send to somebody that is going to impact how you're going to send it to them, when you're going to send it to them, why you're going to send it to them, and all of that impacts whether when they hear that message, they understand it the way you want them to understand it. And then for you, the person who sent that message, to know that person understood it and accepts the meaning of what you meant the same way you meant it to be sent, you have to know whether they did or not. And that's the feedback side. So you have to know how to actively encourage that feedback and actively listen to people in a way that you're going to get the information you need to hear from them without any barriers or blocks in the way of getting that information that says, yes, they understood it the way you meant it. So you can feel comfortable they're going to deliver what you've asked them to do, for example, the way you've asked them to do it. But so many times I've had leaders leave text messages or something to people, and they come back and say, I told them how to do the damn thing. I don't understand why they didn't get it done. Well, there was a lot of things in there. Maybe you didn't deliver it the right way. Maybe it's you didn't define it correctly. But with two things, you didn't get any feedback from that text message telling you they understood what you meant. You're just assuming they did, and that I always tell people assume is a pretty bad thing when it comes to communication because when you spell it out and hyphenate it, it's as hyphen you hyphen me. You make an ass out of you and me when you assume. So uh, I have a lot of times because we don't teach this in high school, a lot of college, a lot of people get through their PhD program and never take uh, uh, interpersonal communication courses, enough of them to really understand how to talk with people and connect effectively with people and to create and that's hard enough to do with one person. Now you're talking about doing it with a whole department of varied people, and sometimes they're distance, they're remote from you. So that all of that plays into how well you can communicate. And I normally find that's the biggest problem leaders have. There's probably not that they don't know how to have a difficult discussion, that they've been trained in that. They've been to team building session after team building session. So they kind of understand what a team is, and collaboration is synergy and all that kind of stuff. To optimize each team member's skill sets, they understand that. They Where they fail is that method that they use to conduct the interaction, the actual communication, interpersonal communication during that team session or during that conversation or whatever it might be. It's a skill set. There's a different set of skills, communication skills that you need to consider, and methodology about process of communication you need to consider when you conduct a performance appraisal, that when you're conducting a team building session or you're operating as a team leader in a team. There are different skill sets that you need to bring to bear. And if you do not understand those, and most people don't because they're never trained in them, it falls apart. So let's say we are able to get these people trained to do that effectively, and they start working on the problem, and we begin as we need. But perhaps there's an area that they're struggling with that I'm not an expert in. We can go get that executive vice president, bring in another consultant who is expert, and then talk to them about intervening the same way that I am intervening with them, and then then I'll manage that consultant, and they can come in and operate, and that person gets a skill set, and then they can leave, and we're all set. We're down the path. Things are improving. We do the follow-up assessment. Everything's great, and things are better. And most of the time when that happens, I end up coming in and doing that in several other departments, even if they're not to that level that this department is in terms of failure, primarily because they see the value in enhancing that communication education. That isn't happening normally in other consulting companies, are normally not heavily into that. Um, so how does that play out with our government? So you see how that could help somebody improve. Uh, the problem becomes who is in charge of deciding. If you notice, there was an executive who saw this mess happening, who brought me in to start the process. So, who is in charge of whether the government is all screwed up and is functioning like this bad department is? Who are the people who look at that and say, okay, what's going on here? I mean, let's just take a breather and let's assess all this and see what the problem is. We have that problem, and that the person who's in charge, who is seen at the very top, he doesn't have a board of directors he reports to. He is the ultimate decision making machine in their mind. And if you get a bad person in that position, it's an extremely difficult task to change that company. We had one with Uber. Okay, that's a good example of a company whose CEO was kind of going on a wild trip. I mean, he wasn't, there was some sexual harassment going on. There's all kinds of distrust amongst the drivers. There was a lot of frustration. He was at the top. What he had over him was a board of directors who had the final authority to eliminate him out of the position. We have no board of directors for the President of the United States. Who is that board of directors? Who would say, this isn't going right. We're not happy. Something's wrong. We need to fix it. And we need to bring somebody in and help fix it. Who makes that decision if the President of the United States is the problem? It's the people. We are the stockholders of the United States. So if you equate us to a company, the shareholders will vote and tell the board of directors, they'll appoint a board of directors to oversee this. Maybe that's what we need in this democracy is a board of directors who oversees the value of operating our democracy. And if in fact someone like the president, who would be the CEO of our country, isn't performing the way they should, that board of directors has the ability to take that CEO out of the position and institute in somebody else to work that, to represent us. So that board of directors really, as a team, that board of directors represents all of us, the shareholders. Uh, Short of that, the shareholders would have to just unite in such a majority that we send a signal that says, yes, the Constitution says this, but this is outside of the realm of the Constitution. This is a severe crisis outside of the realm of the Constitution. We are calling a special election, and we are suspending the president and all of the cabinet during that period of time. And we're allowing a particular board to come in to manage a situation until we decide whether we're going to eliminate the president and all of the board, or whether we're going to eliminate some of the board but not all the board, or not the whatever that's going to be. We've got to get in there, take a look at it, and then decide. And in the meantime, this assigned board will guide and direct the United States of America until we come to a conclusion of what we need to be doing. And it can't be the oligarchs of the world, and it can't be the politicians of the world. It has to be somebody that's going to represent the welfare of all, the majority of the people. So the people would have to kind of define who that board could be. It doesn't have to be a lot of people. It could be just 5 people. Okay. But the idea would be then at that point, perhaps that board, once they put a halt to the bleeding, so to speak, stop the bleeding, now we need to take a look at what the issue is so we can fix it. We're doing a triage here. And so what happens is you could bring some people in to say, what's happening? Well, one of the things we would be looking at is the Senate, the judicial system, all of the departments and how they're running, which would probably were running pretty efficiently until this scenario came up. But the House and the Senate and the judicial system and the executive team all need serious looking. They need to be looked at seriously. How they are supposed to operate, whether that's functional or not, how they are actually operating in relation to how they should be operating, and what's causing the variance. Okay? The same way we would go in and do an assessment of an organization. And what we would find, for example, is there's some frustration. For example, we know Congress, the Senate and the House, represent um, the people. Okay, that's our house. They are, we are their bosses. We are their shareholders, if you will, and we're asking them to talk with each other in a way that is balances it out so that we consider the minority, but we implement the majority of feeling, but we consider the minority. And the fact is that minority and majority might change depending on topic. If you talk about healthcare, you might find that there's a lot more people who are open to, say, Medicare for all. In other words, everybody has the right to health care in America, and it shouldn't cost you a fortune. So you might find there are a lot of more people that once that was explained out how it worked are open to that. Okay, but on the other hand, it might be they have on immigration, they may have a totally different perspective. The shareholders may have a different perspective. So the House has to try to balance out what's right for each of the key areas that the shareholders are interested in. They're interested in health, they're interested in housing, they're interested in transportation, they're interested in food and livelihoods and jobs and those kinds. So each of those areas, they may have varying degrees as a majority. That majority may change depending on which topic you're talking about. But we try to handle it like the majority will handle all issues that everybody's interested in the same way. Probably a mistake, but that's just my opinion. But what we do know is this. Let's take a look at if I went in and did an interpersonal communication assessment on the House of Representatives. If I went in and I was talking with employees and I said, what is the thing that what's the one thing you feel like your leadership is doing wrong? What do you dislike the most about your leadership? It's going to be they argue, they can't get together, they don't talk to each other. Okay, and what one thing would you like this if you could select one thing, what would that be that you would like your leaders to do better? Like them to get together and talk things and work things out. Just about 80% of all the assessments I did over 45 years ended up around communication in some form or the other. Um, so, what is it that has got us blocked? So, what would happen if I came into your company and I sit down with you and I say, well, how are things going? What is one of the things that your leader is doing that you dislike the most? And you told me they refuse to talk to me. They won't talk to me. They refuse to have any communication with me at all. How would you feel about that leader? Is that is that what we call best practice as leadership? Is that what you would want your leader doing in your company? Is just telling the people and other employees, talking to you as the employees. So if the leader of the house says to everybody, "I'm not talking to anybody. We're just not going to have any discussions." And you got the Democrats, you got the Republicans, and I don't want them talking to each other. That's it. I'm not going to talk to you, and I don't want anybody else talking to anybody. How would you feel about that leader? What would be your comments to me about that leader? You can put them here in this YouTube. I'm doing wherever I'm putting this, whether it's LinkedIn, YouTube, wherever I post this, you can put in the comments, how would you feel about that leader who said, uh, I don't, I'm not talking to you. I'm not telling you anything. We're not going to have any conversations whatsoever. We're not going to discuss any issues, period. That's it. Until you do exactly what I tell you, even though you may not like what I'm telling you. You've got to do it exactly like I told you. Now, I'm pretty certain that would come off as an authoritarian, coercive leader. That power base would be highly coercive, what we call legitimate. He has the authority to do it. He can threaten you, he can disrupt you. He has all of that authority. He can try to force you into doing what he wants you to do, even though you think it's the wrong thing. The dilemma here is if you were doing that inside this department I was working with in this company, if that's how you felt about that leader, and it was irreconcilable. In other words, the leader was just resisting every piece of advice and information. We were trying to help them to be that way. They were just saying, nope, this is the way I'm going to be. That's it. Those employees have an option. They can quit that company and go to work somewhere else. Now, it may take them a little while to find another job, but they, in the meantime, they quiet quit. They just do the bare minimum that they need to do. So the department starts falling apart. And then when they start disappearing, the word gets out that this isn't necessarily the company you want to go to work for. You begin to find less and less people who are of quality who would want to go to work for you. All of those are resulting factors of that kind of behavior. That is difficult to do in the House of Representatives. The senators aren't supposed to quit. They've been elected in there for 2 years. They hold that in your face. They say you can't take me out of here for 2 years. But you know what? They can quit tomorrow on their own. They can quit. You can't take them out, but they can quit tomorrow. And we've got them doing that now. We've got people who are finally saying, I'm sorry, I can't do this anymore. I'm just leaving. I'm not going to operate in a place like that. But you have a bunch of them who are focused on power and not the results of what their job is to people, satisfying you, the shareholder. They're less interested in that, more interested in holding on to the power. It's not even the $150,000 or $170,000 job. A lot of them may be making more than that in civilian life. It's the power, the position of power, the connections that you can get as a senator or as a congressperson that hold them into that position. But the ultimate is you are the shareholder as the people. At some point, it's going to crack if you don't bring someone in to help deal with the problem. You're going to lose all of your employees. We're all going to scatter. Uh, it can get really highly disruptive and hurt a lot of people, a lot more people. I mean, normally, if a bunch of people quit a company, it doesn't hurt everybody in America. When Congress shuts down, it hurts everybody in America. Everybody. That's why, as a country, we have to kind of unify. And if this is a scenario that's outside of the Constitution, in other words, the President of the United States and Congress, or a segment of Congress, is deciding not to pay attention to the Constitution. That includes the Justice Department. Then we have to also ask ourselves, do we need a different kind of solution? Maybe we need to enact something that says we, the people, are going to come in and put a board of directors over you. We want a special election and put certain people who the vast majority of America wants in there to run the executive branch. We want the Justice Department to uh, be able to uh, uh, be replaced with a more balanced group. In other words, we can replace people on a special election basis outside of the Constitution because we demand it as the people. If the vast majority of people voted for that, they're, what are you going to tell? You're going to tell the people who own the government, the shareholders, they can't do it? Huh? The alternative is for them to then put together another um, government. That's where you have revolution come into play, and that's the worst possible solution you can have. Now, uh, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out, but just I think the most important, powerful influential thing that people can do right now is to start communicating with each other. Start interpersonally communicating with each other. Don't do this through social media. Don't do that. In your community, start getting together. In your town halls, don't just have a town hall where you bitch and three or four people get up, say something. In fact, don't even invite your Congress representative to the town hall. Just get together, all of you, red, blue, Democrat, Republican, and ask yourself, what do we need to have happen that's going to protect all of us, that's going to help all of us? Because you were talking like that until about 10 years ago. We were at least having a sense of connection. That got divided. And look where it got divided. It got divided about 10 years ago. It got splintered 4 years ago. And it's been being pushed apart harder and harder by the existing administration. Is it pushing it harder and harder? And that forces the other side to push harder against it. That separates everybody more. You have to, you, the people, have to stop that. That's the only people who can stop this, is the people of America. You guys have to start coming together in your communities. And then if find somebody like, there's a lot of people like me in every community, somebody who help facilitate you and deciding what you want as a group that you can all agree on. Everybody, red, blue, Democrat, Republican, religious, not religious, all of you get together. There are things you all agree: affordable housing, affordable health care, quality food that's safe, safe drinking water, housing that is reasonable and not being, you're not being gouged. All of those things are things that I don't care what your representative are in terms of whether you believe in God, you don't believe in God, whether you are part of, you're here on a visa or whatever, or even illegal. Uh, all of you, all of those things are important to every single one of you, regardless of your belief systems. You just need somebody to come get you all together. Get somebody of every kind of varying belief system all at one table. If you have 100, put 10 people at 10 tables, all of you different. And then ask, what are the things that are really important to each and every one of you equally as much? And you're going to find there are a lot of things that they're supposed to be doing in Washington, but you have somebody saying, I'm not talking to anybody, so therefore we are not going to do our job. If you were owned a company, if you were a shareholder company, and this guy came to you and said, I don't care about what you say, I'm not going to do anything now. I'm just shutting down right now. I'm not going to do anything. How long will that person last in your company? Ask yourself that question. How long will that person last? You need to go. You need to go as people, as the people of America, unified and represented inside Washington, represented and by somebody who cares about all. But first you have to tell them exactly what you care about, that you all agree you care about. It's awful hard for them to reject what you say all of you want them to work on that you care about. It may only be 5 things. It may, even if you started with 2 things like healthcare or something like that, even if you started with just that, you go in and you send a signal to everybody up in that Congress right now. You get your ass back into Congress and you do your job. And by the way, we all agree on this. So write this up this way. And don't present me anything other than what we said we agree on. Now get it done. And if you don't get it done, We, the people out here in America, all of us are going to rise our voices up and say we need to eliminate in a special election outside of the Constitution. We need to get rid of everybody who doesn't want to do the job. It's pretty simple stuff. So you could do that, but you've got to do it as people. You can't do it as individuals. You can't do it as an independent group. You can't do it as a Democrat or do it as a Republican. You simply have to do it as a person who lives in America and you're telling people what you want. What you want. And you need to understand what each of you are afraid of, what you're fearful of, so that you can begin to relieve that fear amongst each other. There is no replacement going on here in America. There is only growth. More people came to this country because they felt it was a place where everybody could be free to enjoy what they wanted to work on. Don't impose anything on anybody else. You're supposed to live and live in the way you want to live. It shouldn't be required to be a color, a religion, or anything else for that matter. Now, uh, it's easier for a guy like me when I was working in consulting because I got brought in by somebody who saw the problem. Now, I will tell you this. You're wasting your time in your town halls. Just watching town halls, you're wasting your time. The real value in your town hall is what I said. Get all as many people as you can get and in many different small town halls in a district as you can get to get the vast majority of you together and then consolidate whatever each of you come up with into the 4 or 5 things that you want Congress to do for you that you say is there, and then see how that plays out against all the other districts in America. You're going to find out you can probably narrow this down to 5 or 6 things. And if they fix those 5 or 6 things, we'd be real happy in America with everybody in Congress, regardless of their party. But you've got to come together as people. The way to do that is in your town halls. Turn your town halls into productive sessions. Find a consultant, find a facilitator, someone like myself who can put you in rooms together and ask you to do certain things and then ask the right questions for you to do them that will consolidate your energy into a collaborative group of people who come up with through synergy, through all of them coming to, not necessarily do you agree with everything, but it's something you can accept and live with, is what synergy is. And it usually turns out to be a better thing than any one of you could have come up with on your own. So that, if we can get that going in town halls like we would in corporations, you can improve your department, you can improve your country, but you've got to go do some work. And I think that when town halls all get together and they can get a representative to march into Congress and lay this stuff on the table as a unified groups of districts. So you got all these districts out here. Those districts come together in a state, and those states come together and they put together this what everybody is saying they want, and then you start taking this up to your representatives, and you have you you begin to narrow this down to that board of directors who will present what you want them to do. They start refusing to do that, we're going to be in a much deeper problem than I can even imagine, but it can be rectified. It's just not going to be rectified uh, without a lot of pain and suffering. So, uh, as a consultant, uh, what your problem we're facing in America is we don't have a board of directors overseeing the presidencies and all of the government as a whole. Somebody who stands above somebody like Warren Buffett and others who have credentials who they don't even have to be billionaires, but we could have other people who have character, who have morals, who have ethics, and who we all believe in are have the very very best interest of the United States at heart. Who can present what everybody else says. They all agree Congress should solve this problem. You can solve this problem first. Now, that's what representatives are supposed to be doing. They're supposed to go back and facilitating you through this process, but they're not doing that. They're going back and telling you what they think that you want to have presented. I heard this so many times. I've heard them start the town hall meeting with, "Here's what I have for a agenda for you." Uh-uh. Here's what we have for agenda for you. Now, you need to go back and take this material. This is what should happen. You now need to take this material and present it the way we tell you on the table and see how much that agrees with what all the other 600 and some odd people in the Congress get presented to them. This is what your representative do. They're not doing it. They're not facilitating you for your needs and then taking that and going back and trying to consolidate that in Congress. That's where the breakdown is. And it's a communication breakdown. It's literally an interpersonal communication because they're not presenting and interrelating with you with empathy and compassion. Well, I'm not going to say not all of them, but generally speaking, your town hall is not uh, a working session for you to be able to provide your representative what you want them to actually go back and lay down so that they can all have, if everybody did the same thing the same way, they would all have a bunch of information. And out of that, they could consolidate that down into something that they work on together that needs to get done and passed and through the presidency and on into law fairly easy. But if you let them start being the one that's in control and that they have the power over this, then all of a sudden it's more what they're looking for, and that's how they can get isolated and bought off by special interest groups and things like that. The special interest group they should be concerned about is conducting that town hall like I told you you need to conduct it. Try it. Try it. If you're hearing me, if you're watching this and you hear this, ask them to conduct their town hall by bringing in a facilitation consultant and consult. In fact, don't even bring them in. Do this yourself. And then when they come in, don't give them an opportunity to start out. Say, we have this already decided. Now, we're going to present it to you. We expect you to go back and present it this way. There is no discussion here. Okay. And if they resist that, then you got the wrong person in position. They're not representing you at that point. You'll know that. It'll be clear as a bell. Clear as a bell. Okay, now I'm going to get off of here. I've tried to be, but this is an interpersonal communication thing. There, we're not communicating with each other. We've got to learn how to do that. If you want to know how to do that, uh, my website has all the books about the navigation. It talks about the importance of bringing together interpersonal relationship, understanding what that means with these processes of communication. If you have struggling with that and you want some help with that, you can call me. You can schedule an appointment. I'll be glad to discuss it with you, talk about it in terms of how you might get your district and community going that direction. If you happen to be a representative and you really want to understand how to make this work, give me a buzz. Hell, I'm not gonna, I won't even charge you for it. I won't even charge you for it. You just call me and I will help you work through it. And you can get your people back on your side again. You can do what you're supposed to do as a representative. Represent your shareholders, your people, not your businesses, not where the money is. And if you can't do that, you won't call me, I'm pretty sure. But if some of you get in touch with me, it's easy. VictorVogel.com. That I got scheduled there. If you call me, you probably won't reach me on my cell phone if you happen to find out what that is. But if you email me, I'll respond back to you. If we connect, I'll get on a video conference like this and we can talk about how you can get your district working for you and how you and your district can go back and be a powerhouse inside Congress. But you got to do it. If you don't do it, if you're still tied to your special interest groups and you're fearful of your job because without their money you can't get elected. Frankly, I'm hoping that people rise up in mass around the country again, regardless of who you are, what your beliefs are. Just the whole idea that money can buy an election should be enough to make you throw up as a citizen. Um, you can take back your country. Uh, you can do it as a citizens group, or hopefully your representative might call me and say, "How can I do this?" And I'll be glad to guide them through the process. So that's my thoughts on this. This is not any different than me helping that department head. The difference is we don't have somebody requesting that help. And it's much, much needed. Much needed. I hope you stay calm, you think through this. I hope you come together as districts all over the country and start working together, telling your Congress representative. Don't let your congressperson guide you. Tell them what you want. Tell them what you want. Because I'm telling you, vast majority of people in this country want the same thing. All of them need the same thing. It's a basic human needs that you have. You all agree on that. You all agree on that. And for those who don't, we still have to be able to allow you to have this and live in our country. Perhaps down the road you'll see. If you don't, you're still, this is what the majority of us would like in this country. Keep in mind, 70% of the people who didn't vote for Donald Trump. There was a large contingent that voted for Kamala Harris. There was a large contingent that didn't vote at all. And there was about 8% who voted for somebody other than Trump or Harris. When you lump all of those votes together, 70% of them did not vote for Donald Trump. He does not have the will of the people behind him, nor does the Republican Party. It wasn't 70% of the people who voted for Donald Trump. 70% did not vote for Donald Trump. He won the Electoral College, which says something about why the Electoral College sucks. But he didn't win the vote of, he doesn't represent the American people. He represents the Electoral College. They don't necessarily represent the will of the people. The only way that can happen is when one person, one vote, votes for that president. 70% of everybody who can vote in America votes for the president. Then you can say you represent the will of the people. Donald Trump he didn't come close to getting that. 70% of people didn't vote for him. Okay. They didn't vote for Kamala Harris either. So I will tell you this, you could do the same thing. You put all those votes over on the other side. They didn't vote for Kamala Harris either. So that says something about both of those people. probably neither one of them was the right candidate. So people, start holding your town halls, start getting together, start getting somebody to, there's somebody in your community like me who's good at this. Get them in there, get them engaged, get them facilitating you. Somebody who's neutral, who's just primary interest is helping you come up with your what you feel you need to present to your representative, take back to Congress. Um, you can do that. You have all the skills to do that, folks. You have all of the will and the need to do that. You can do it. Okay. All right. Thanks for listening. I know this is long, but you need to pay attention all. Hopefully, you paid attention all the way to the end. Best wishes to you, and God bless America.